movie review for you fans of Wolfpack Entertainment. Obviously, I've spent my entire life being a Superman fan. Now, it started when I was a little kid, and it's grown to this pretty big collection I have here in this room and spread throughout the house. I've seen a lot of different interpretations of the character. I've watched a lot of movies, read a lot of comic books, and watched a lot of the cartoon series. And there's been stuff I've liked, there's been stuff I haven't liked, but in the end, I love Superman. So I'm always going to be the first person in line to see a new incarnation of the Man of Steel. Now, that being said, I was a huge fan of the Christopher Reeve movies. Now, obviously, he was my first Superman, and a lot of my collection is dedicated to him. And they were great, but they were 1978 through the 80s. And then we had Superman Returns, where I really enjoyed Brandon Routh, and I thought Kevin Spacey was an excellent Lex Luthor. But the story was a little bit slow, and it was more of a love letter to the original Donner films. So a lot of people were put out by that movie. And there was some stuff with him having an illegitimate child and stuff that really seemed like it wasn't Superman. So that really kind of hurt the process of the film. And then, a couple years ago, we finally got a more modern interpretation of Superman with the Man of Steel. Now, interestingly enough, if you've been in the comics like I have for a very long time, whether it's Superman, Justice League, Batman, any of them, but especially Superman, a lot of that movie came from a run of comic books called Superman Birthright, which I own the entire collection of Superman Birthright. From the Krypton scenes with the kind of biomechanical things going on, plus those big bugs they were riding and stuff. You know, and Man of Steel, I loved Man of Steel. I felt like it was a good interpretation for the modern day viewer to introduce Superman into our world. Yes, it wasn't the big blue Boy Scout. It wasn't the bright 1978 Christopher Reeve, saying swell, but it was today's Superman. Now, I'm not saying we need to get away from the origins of the character as far as his good to a fault, the big blue Boy Scout, moral high ground kind of guy. But what I'm saying is that with everything, changes have to happen. There has to be an evolution of characters and stories for us to be able to have compelling plots. Okay? So Man of Steel, I thought, was an excellent stepping stone going into Batman versus Superman, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. Obviously, we're going to be playing into the fact that this is the beginning of the Justice League. Now, I went into this movie having loved Man of Steel. I know a lot of you didn't, but we have to remember that Man of Steel was our first introduction to Superman. That was not, there were none of the Donner films, none of the other things were involved in that. It was all modern. It was our first introduction to that character. He had been Superman for 20 minutes, basically, and so I felt like there was a lot of blame on him as far as, the death of Zod. And if you've read the book, it talks about Zod forcing him to kill him because Zod wanted a warrior's death, which is kind of like the Saiyans and Dragon Ball Z. But I won't get into the faults of Man of Steel. We're here to talk about Dawn of Justice, Batman vs. Superman. And I thought that the stepping stone of Man of Steel, jumping into Batman vs. Superman, I was very excited, obviously, being a Superman fan. I had my reservations about Ben Affleck. I obviously didn't know what to expect with Jesse Eisenberg because I'm not a huge fan of his. He's an average actor. I felt like I enjoyed Zombieland and stuff, so that was only the kind of character that I really saw him play, and I didn't love everything that he does. That being said, initial reaction to Batman vs. Superman, I loved it. Now, we'll get into this. I'm going to be as spoiler-free as possible. So there may be some spoilers, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers, you probably should stop listening. But they will be very minimal, and they won't take anything away from the story because I want you to experience it like I did for the first time. Now, I got to see it early, but now everybody's had an opportunity to see it, and that's why I'm doing the review now. We get an introduction to Ben Affleck's Batman, and hands down, like I posted online here recently, I felt like that Ben Affleck, against all odds and against all the fan vitriol, he was an excellent Batman, and he was an even better Bruce Wayne. And he's a Batman that's older and that's been kind of jaded and beat up, and he's dealt with a lot of different things, And so he's very, very disturbed going into this movie. He's been operating as the Batman for 20 years, basically, whereas Superman has only been around as the character Superman for about 18 months. So, you've got some major dynamics here, generational gaps. And you know what that's like even in the workplace, in a generational gap, from a young guy to the old guy, how things should be. So you've got that dynamic, and you've got two people that are so different generationally, power-wise, and operating as superheroes. So there's a lot going on with this movie. And some of the criticisms that I've heard of the film were there was too much going on, and the motivation for Batman to want to fight Superman just wasn't enough, and there's too much CGI. Let's get this straight right now. There was no more CGI in this movie than any of the Marvel movies, any other modern movie that you watch. I mean, Star Wars, 90% of Star Wars is CGI, and we're all okay with that. In a superhero movie, you're going to have CGI. I mean, there's a lot of CGI compared to the 1978 Donner film, but we didn't have CGI really at that point. So I think that's an invalid argument. What this movie is, it is not 100% not a Marvel film. And my biggest fear going in was that they were going to try to do exactly what Marvel has done with their films, kind of mimic that. And I don't think that they did. I thought they made their own DC universe, cinematic universe. They did their own thing, just like Man of Steel. It felt like a continuation of Man of Steel. Ben Affleck was awesome. Gal Gadot was awesome as Wonder Woman. Henry Cavill is great as Superman and Clark Kent. You really got to see him be Clark Kent in this. He was really good. Amy Adams as Lois Lane was phenomenal. She plays such a key role. You get to see Martha Kent back in there. I mean, there were so many things going on. It felt almost operatic. Was the word that I used. It was like you were really watching. It was watching something classic, unfold before our eyes. Was the film perfect? No, by no means was it perfect. But it was a great comic book movie. And if you've read The Dark Knight Returns or The Death and Life of Superman or any of those, that's where the source material came for this film in particular. It really, you can see those influences throughout the film. And I've heard a lot of people say, it's too dark, it's too gritty. We're not going to have the 1950s Superman. We're not going to have the 1966 campy Batman. That's 50 years ago, and I love those. Don't get me wrong, I love those. But that's not what we're at now today. We have new stories to tell, new characters to introduce, new ways of telling things. That's what the creative process is all about. Love it or hate it, change is good. Sometimes change is painful, and sometimes change isn't great, but overall the process of change is good. It helps us grow. And I felt like they grew these characters. It's 2.5 hours long, and I felt like it flew by. I did. I felt like it flew by. The biggest thing with the film, I did feel like Lex Luthor needed a little bit more screen time, because I felt like he needed the opportunity to really even evolve that character even more, because he's a nut. He is a nutcase. He's a sociopathic, conniving, manipulating puke in this movie. You want to punch him in the face, and that's good, because that's what you want. You want to hate the villain. You really want to hate the villain. And there's some moments in the movie that really tear at your heart, especially as a Superman fan. Some of the stuff, the way Superman kind of gets treated, and the way he's kind of shown and portrayed by the media and the public, the outcry. And if you think about that, if we had, we're trying to make this, it's a comic book movie, we're trying to make it as real, as real as possible. So it feels like, the Marvel Universe, you've got like, these things are happening in the Marvel Universe, you've got the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., all that stuff ties together, and it feels like it's happening right then, and people are really living that life. They've done that in a more realistic tone with Batman and Superman, as realistic as you can be with a godlike superhero that can fly and, melt things with his eyes, I get it. But at the same time, they tried to make it feel organic and real, and like these are things happening. How would the world react to Superman, to all the devastation that happened in Man of Steel? How would the world react to that? Him saving the day. If he goes over to, Iraq and takes out ISIS, well, how are we going to feel about that? Yes, he probably did the right thing, but, was he following the rules of engagement? Those type of things. And the political system is involved. And so we get to see that idea of like, Superman could save a cat in a tree, but if he breaks a tree branch, is the homeowner going to sue him? Those kind of things happen. We are so jaded nowadays, and people don't just do good for good's sake. So how does a man with all that power that lives that life, how does he carry himself in that kind of world? you know, and then you've got the side where Batman is almost delivering out way too much vigilante justice. He's going over the top with some of his beatdowns on some of the criminals and stuff and branding them and different things. And so, you know, you've got that dynamic between Clark Kent and Superman, who tries to be good to a fault and learning what he's doing as being this almost godlike character. And then you got Batman, who's kind of this, you know, this dark, brooding, twisted PTSD, you know, almost sociopath. He really is. Batman is the greatest. He's the great detective. He's unbelievable. He's awesome, master of all martial arts, and I love him. But he is kind of he's kind of at times he can be an anti-hero because of how hardcore and dark that he can be. You know, he watched his parents die in front of him. So you've got those two dynamics, and Batman is afraid that somebody with absolute power like Superman, if there's the 1% chance that he could possibly go bad, well, Batman, there's got to be somebody that can stop him. And so Batman's motivation is he's seen the devastation that power like that can bring, and he needs to stop him. So in his mind, he's got to stop Superman. And that's where you get the antagonistic side of it in the fight. Now, behind the scenes, you got Luthor kind of weaving his web, making things, you know, fall into place the way he wants to kind of pit these two together as well. And as many complaints as I've heard about, you know, oh, Superman, you know, he went and fought and all this stuff. Even to the end, Superman really didn't want to fight Batman. He didn't really want to fight him. You know, he fights him because he has to. You know, he does what needs to be done. And then Batman and him kind of have a meeting of the minds, and Bruce gets to see that Superman is not just an all-powerful being here to do whatever he wants. He's a man. He's still a man. He's still human. Even though he's Kryptonian, he's human. He has a mother. He's had a father. He cares about people. And that's where we kind of get that teaming up, and then they have to come together against Doomsday, which I've heard people were complaining about his spikes weren't big enough. It was still Doomsday. I mean, his spikes weren't big enough? Yeah, it would have looked a little bit cooler if they'd had bigger bones, you know, protruding off of him and stuff. But it's still Doomsday. It's still an awesome fight, and you get to see Superman be Superman, and it really leads up to a great possibility with what Justice League can be. Like I said, I didn't want to put any spoilers in, and I felt like it was a well-written script. It was intelligent. It was fun. There were some sad moments in it. There's some angering moments. There were some uplifting and happy moments. There's a few little bit of quirky jokes in there and stuff. And I thought everybody did a great job. And if you haven't seen it, you need to go see it. You're going to enjoy it. I believe you will enjoy it. And don't listen to the critics, because the critics are killing this thing. But the user ratings are 70-80% positive. So the fans are loving it, but the critics don't. And it's because they've been brainwashed that we think we need to see the same thing coming out every time, you know, that Marvel has. And I love Marvel movies, don't get me wrong, but they're two different entities. It's apples and oranges. I know they're both superheroes, but they're two different universes, totally different, you know. It definitely is dark. It's PG-13, you know. Batman doles out some major punishment. It asks some real moral questions, you know, and I felt like it was an intelligent, thought-provoking, good modern interpretation of both characters in today's world, with a great ending that leads into the Justice League movie that's on its way. I hope you enjoyed my review. If you've got more questions, if you got you want to argue with me, that's fine. I'm not going to argue back. I loved the film. I hope that you do too. I thought it was great. I love Superman, and I'm trying to look at it without having red and blue tinted glasses, because I know that obviously I'm going to root for Superman. And as far as the Superman movie goes, it was hard to be a Superman fan watching this film because of some of the stuff that goes on, because you really felt for the character and the characters around him. So be sure to like this video. Be sure to comment in the comment section. Be sure to subscribe and share it. And if you haven't seen it, go see it. And if you've already seen it, I'm going to go see it a couple more times. So until next time, I'm Wolf. This has been a Wolfpack Entertainment movie review of Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. We'll catch you on the flip side.